everyone, my name is Miss Jenny, and today for our Art in the Garden week, I will be creating a watercolor painting of flowers using just different types of shapes and lines. Maybe yours would look something like this. But first, just in case you don't have any watercolor paints at home already, I would like to show you two different ways that you can make your very own homemade watercolor paints using different ingredients or items that you may already have around your house. Both of the recipes for my homemade liquid watercolor paints only need two ingredients. The main ingredient will be water for either one. And for one, you have the option of actually recycling old, used up, and dried markers. If you don't happen to have any old, dried up markers on hand, another alternative is using some type of food coloring or food dye. You could use the liquid kind, such as this. The gel style works as well. Or if you happen to have any leftover egg dye from Easter, you could use that too to make your very own homemade watercolor paints. Let's get started. In addition to using water and food coloring or food dye to make liquid watercolor paints, you will also need to find some sort of cup or bowl to actually mix and store your paints in. And I would also recommend finding a tool to use to mix the paints as well, such as a paintbrush or a spoon or a stick, anything that you can use just to mix the water and food coloring together. To get started, all you need to do is fill your cups up with small amounts of water. And I do recommend starting with small amounts. A little bit of paint goes a long way. If you need more, you can always make more later. So I am starting to make 3 different colors, red, yellow, and blue, the primary colors. And I'm starting with these primary colors because I can always use these and mix these together to make new colors such as green, orange, or purple. Every food dye is a little bit different, so how much dye you actually need can vary. For this style, I found that about 3 drops of food dye to about 1 ounce of water works very well. And I'm just going to continue putting 3 drops of food coloring or food dye into my water. All right, now I'm just going to use a paintbrush to mix the dye thoroughly into the water. If you find that the paint isn't quite saturated enough or dark enough, you can always experiment by adding a little bit more food dye to the water at a time. I'm going to continue mixing these up. And then I'm also going to create some secondary colors by mixing primary colors together. To make the secondary colors, green, orange, and purple, or violet, you can either mix those directly with the food coloring dyes, or you can mix together the paints that you've already made. I'm first going to go ahead and make green. To make green, we do need to mix a little bit of blue and some yellow. Give that a stir with a paintbrush. And that looks a little bit more on the blue side, so I think I will add a touch more yellow to it. Next, I'll go ahead and make orange. And orange is created by mixing red and yellow together. I'm just going to use a small amount of red. And when mixing colors together, you may have to kind of experiment. Sometimes we accidentally use too much of one color or not enough of another. So if you are creating the secondary colors by mixing primary colors together, again, just go a little bit at a time. A little bit can go a long way. My last secondary color to make is purple or violet. which I have found violet is a difficult color to mix. To create violet or purple, we do mix red and blue together. So I'm going to start with some red. And into that, I'm going to add a small amount of blue. That may have been a little bit too much. I'm actually making this a little bit more. Okay, that's a pretty dark violet. It almost looks like a purplish brown. So again, this is just one of those colors where I need to keep experimenting on my ratios or the proportions of colors being combined. But I think I will work with that. So next, I'm going to show you a different way that you can create your very own liquid watercolor paint using different materials. For my next recipe to make your own homemade liquid watercolor paint, you will need some water and some old dried up markers. In addition to those two things, you will need some type of cup or bowl that is a little bit bigger, something that is tall enough and sturdy enough to support the height and the weight of the markers. To get started, just fill the bottoms of the cups with a small amount of water. I'm only filling these up about a ½ inch deep. Remember, a small amount of paint goes a long way. Once you have your cups filled with the water, go ahead and place your old, used, dried up markers tip down into the water. What happens is that the water begins to suck out the ink or the pigment from the markers. And the longer that you let the marker sit in the water, the more saturated or dark the paint will become. So this process may take a couple of days. You may actually need to let your markers sit in the water for a few days in order to get some really nice, deep, dark colors. These paints here that I have at the top have already been sitting for a couple of hours. So if you look closely, you can see a difference. These colors are much more saturated. The colors that I just began to mix are much more diluted. They're not as dark. Next, I'm going to be creating a flower drawing using a variety of different types of lines and shapes. You can use any type of line that you can think of. You can use straight lines, curvy lines, wavy lines, zigzag lines, or even swirls. And you can also use different shapes such as circles, ovals, triangles, squares, rectangles. Any type of shape or any type of line that you want to use will work perfectly well. To draw my flowers, I like to use either a permanent marker or a pen, but you can use any type of drawing tool on hand that you have. That is completely up to you. So I'm going to get started first just by filling my paper completely with as many different flowers as I can create using different shapes and lines. And when I'm all finished drawing my flowers, I will use my homemade liquid watercolor paints to fill those in with some beautiful colors. Now, in the event that you don't have any paintbrushes at home, there are a few different alternatives that you can use. One great alternative is to always use a cotton swab or a Q-tip, and you can always dip the Q-tip directly in your paint and spread that around. You can also recycle an old toothbrush to use as a paintbrush as well. Thank you so much for joining me today and learning how you can make your very own homemade liquid watercolor paints.